everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the 3. We're really excited to be here again today. We're doing it a little bit different. We have got loads we want to talk to you about other stuff that we've been up to. However, we have got an amazing guest on today. Everybody's talking about him. Everybody knows what is going on at the moment with John. And if you do not know, you are about to find out. It's live, it's raw, it's awful, it's upsetting, and it's emotional. And we have been able to secure John today on our chat. So I'm Kat Hall, over 20 years in the care sector. I'm an advocate of the sector, and I'm really honoured to be joined by my beautiful ladies, Sophie and Obi, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hello. Thank you, Kat. It was a great introduction. Really excited to see and hear about what John Allen's got to tell us. So I'm Sophie Chester-Glynn. I'm Director of Co-Produced Care and also Director of Manor Community, which provides services for people, older people and people with learning disabilities and mental health needs. And of course, Co-Produced Care does advocacy work, research, and has our own live stream. So people will know us from there. And yes, really excited for the second episode. The first episode where we have a guest, and we've really taken the time to platform him and his story because it's such an important one. It's one that's going to resonate with loads of people who have care services, especially SMEs, and how important it is to really just look at everything from finance to commissioning to how you're doing your services and reaching out for help. So yes, happy listening, everyone. And Obi.
Hi, everyone. I'm Obi, and I'm also very excited for episode 2 of the 3. Kat, yes, you did such a fantastic job with the introduction. And today's episode is emotional, and I'm really excited for everyone to get to hear about John's journey, really, because it's something that really needs to be spoken about. And I especially love that he's transforming his, he's using his experience to continue to tell and shine a light on social care, which is what we're all about. Founder of hscc.ai, and if you see the little short videos of a lady in blue using daily props to talk about social care and to highlight stuff, yes, that's me. And I've been 10 years in the sector, and I'll say between Sophie and Kat, I'm the youngest in terms of age. I've been in the sector, so I'm doing more learning, and I'm just so excited to be in this space with 2 absolutely amazing women, because their journeys, well, all of our journeys together, we're hoping to share the stories of social care, and more importantly, to raise awareness about how amazing, absolutely amazing the sector is.
All right then. So now we're absolutely delighted to have our first guest of the podcast. So we're going to introduce John Allen, and John has had a lot going on in his organisation. He's the NHS Director of Nursing and a care home owner. So a lot of people will relate with some of the things that John has gone through. So we're just going to crack on and bring him in and let him introduce himself and talk about his story. So hello, John. Welcome to the 3 podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you today?
Hi, Sophie. Well, I've had better times in my life than I'm going through right now, but just today I'm fairly okay. I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to come and talk to you guys and the folks that are listening and watching your podcast. I think it's a really powerful platform for the social care sector. So delighted to have an opportunity to talk to all you guys.
Brilliant. Okay. So we've got a few questions that we want to go through with you, but I actually think it would be helpful if you just kind of talk about what you've been going through in the sector with your organisation, and what kind of brought you to that stage. I think it will be relatable to quite a few people, and it's been through quite a lot. And I am sorry for everything that you had to manage. It's really hard and it's heart-wrenching. But I think that actually it might be a precursor to what a lot of people might be about to go through, maybe with how things are. But yeah, no, let's hear a little bit from you about what you went through and what you're going through at the moment.
And I think, John, it would be really helpful because I know you're 40 years in the care sector. So you're not somebody that is just gone in, bought, purchased a care home and tried to wing it. You are an expert in the sector, not only social care. I believe you've done the nursing side, etc., and you've worked for private, public services. I think it'd be really good for the viewers to understand as sort of how you got to purchasing your care home initially and what is going on now. That'd be amazing.
Okay, so a little bit of a pod history. So I've been in health and social care for 40 years. Trained originally as an enrolled nurse when I was about 19, after a brief spell in the army, and worked for a year or two at that, and then converted to become a psychiatric nurse in the kind of days where the old psychiatric institutions were still up and running. Worked my way up slowly, part-time study, etc., to eventually be initially the Deputy Director of Nursing at the South London and Maudsley, a very prestigious organisation, and then Director of Nursing and Clinical Governance at Oxfordshire, which was originally Oxfordshire Mental Health Trust, but went through mergers and whatnot, became Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire Mental Health Trust. Left there to become a Director of Mental Health for the United Health UK after completing an MBA at Oxford University, and worked in consulting and commissioning at that time. Took an exit from there after 3 years, a redundancy, as the kind of whole facilitating external support for commissioning scheme that was around at that time the wheels started to come off of that. And at that time, decided I didn't really want to go back into the NHS, didn't want to go back into corporate, and I'd been working with a guy with a finance background, and we looked at investing in the care sector together. So we bought our kind of first care home via that route. A couple of years later, bought the second one, and all went pretty well up until COVID, I suppose. So that's a kind of bit of the background in a very short summary. So then what brought us to here? So our care homes are older, converted buildings, small bed numbers, so sub 30 beds. One was 31 originally, our other is now 29, was original 22 when we bought it. One residential, one nursing. The 31 bed, I suppose, is where the problem started. So we traded pretty well with that care home, taking quite a lot of local authority fees, but into a home that was overly exposed to double occupancy. So out of our 31 beds, we had 16 of them were double occupancy, 8 double occupancy rooms, 16 beds in total. So up until COVID, local authority would buy those nursing care home beds at kind of a reasonable rate, not too bad, but given we were putting 2 people in each of those rooms, it was kind of affordable and manageable, and the home did pretty well. Post-COVID, local authority, without any consultation, said no more double occupancies. We're not buying any double occupancy beds anymore. That took 250,300 maybe off of our top line, made our debt pretty much unserviceable because we raised our debt originally against the kind of care home's historic occupancy valuation. So we started struggling with our covenants, breaching covenants because we just didn't have enough revenue coming in to service them. We put a strategy together. During COVID, we'd raised additional finance and put additional 7 beds on our other home, the residential, the first home we bought, which was Lathbury Manor, small 22 bed, but it had a top floor, which the previous owners that used to live in has converted 19th century coaching house, I should say. Lovely home, lovely grounds, always been very popular in the local area. We were able to get the top floor developed. Bit of a challenge as a kind of the building project had just started as COVID hit. But that home was doing pretty well, always had good occupancy, generally attracted a decent amount of private fee payers. So there's a story there that I'll come back to briefly in this story. But the first point of kind of fracture was the loss of double occupancy rooms. That was the big loss, which then made our debt pretty challenging. The strategy we came up with when we knew we tried to restructure debt with the bank. They weren't interested in restructuring. They said you've got to come up with some other solution. So we looked to sell our care home Lathbury, had decent valuations for it, valuation level that would hopefully clear the debt and some other obligations where we'd kind of pump some money in during the process to sort out some conflict we had with minority shareholders and some additional finance that we needed to sort them out or to help kind of sort that position out and bolster our cash flow, thinking that we had a solution in hand and that the valuation of the two businesses together supported the kind of level of debt we were taking on. And along with that debt came personal guarantees and indeed a security against our own houses, which we're kind of exposed to. So lots of mistakes there. You look back and think, why on earth did we do that? But, when you've got a business, you think, oh, yeah, it should be valuation trade currently 3.5. We're only exposed to 2.5. It might tick up a bit more over time with interest and things. It seemed reasonable and sensible at the time with a short-term strategy. Sell Lathbury Manor, pay down all the debt, invest in our home that's exposed to double occupancy. It got plenty of opportunity for planning permission to get that up to kind of 30 to 40 bed single occupancy home. So that was the plan. Unfortunately, during COVID, we had a period with an awful manager that our manager had left, our kind of long-serving manager left for maternity, was working to have a child, didn't feel she could do that alongside managing a care home. So she left. We hired a new manager during COVID who turned out to be an absolute nightmare. We didn't manage him particularly well or get him out soon enough. We had about 80% staff turnover during his tenure. All our governance fell apart and we got an RI to boot from the CQC. That over time basically led to the home because we couldn't get CQC back in after a while to re-inspect. It took time. We got them in once. I think that was a strategic mistake. I'd built a whole new team predominantly through sponsorship. That was the only place we could get staff. And they weren't ready for a re-inspection. I thought that I was being ambitious because the RI was impacting us. I pushed for an early re-inspection and we got a second RI off the back of that. And then the CQC, in their particular crises, disappeared. No more re-inspections. Slowly, that eroded any private inquiries into Lathbury. And for some reason, over the last 18 months, even local authority referrals started slowing up. And whatever referrals came in, there was predatory purchasing. So the contract rates in Lathbury are advertised as about $950. So Milton Keynes has been pretty generous. They've done 10% increases the last few years. But when you actually go and try and fill a bed with them, they'll say to you, we've put this offer out. So it's okay to take that contract price, $950. It's not great, but it's kind of full occupancy and we might just scrape by with little to no margin. But they say, oh no, well, we've had an offer for $850. So come below $850 if you want this placement. So although they've got contract at $950, $850, Worcester's doing the same, by the way. So there's this kind of purchasing process going on where they advertise a contract rate and an increase, but the brokerage team will come at you when they've got plenty of capacity in the system or somebody's offering them beds cheaper, whether that's people with predominantly private pay selling the last 10% cheap just to keep those last 10% of beds filled. I don't know. That's my kind of working assumption about what's going on in the sector. But suddenly, we've never seen predatory purchasing quite like this. Last year has been a nightmare for commissioners coming in and bidding below their contract rates and telling you you've got to come below our contract rates. We're looking for best value. So it's absolutely fierce. So you end up so we took a home, Lathbury, historically great occupancy, 90% plus with a fee take of, on average, close to £1,000 with a mix of private payers to the end of this year, running around below 80% occupancy with a fee take average of about $850 per week. That just became critical. And because that had been sustaining previously the kind of the loss of the double occupancy beds in Norton Hall, our nursing home. So the bank gets... Yeah.
Sorry, John. Before we go on to what sort of happened now, I've just got a couple of... I'm literally gobsmacked. And I just sit here and I think my jaw has dropped about 20 million times on things that you're saying. And I'm quite shocked about the double occupancy as well. And interested, did they give you like a notice period that was going to be ending, or did they just cut it? What was the angle on that? What led them to cut that? Was it because of COVID, or was it just, I just don't understand how that arrived. Like, just explain that bit to me a little bit more. And I feel you about the registered manager and the RI stuff. So I had a similar incident with the CQC where they come for an unannounced inspection 2 days after I just brought in my first cohort of international workers. So I'd not invited them in for that inspection, but it was 2 days. So we went from outstanding down to good because these workers were new, and we were doing a lot of shadowing and embedding in the culture, in our area. The clients that we were looking after wasn't used to people from overseas coming in and offering them care. So, they marked me down on preferences not being met, which, I did challenge, but then I thought, Kat, stop, because you're not going to get anywhere and it might tarnish things moving forward. So I do understand the pressures that you would have had on, you can't get a domestic workforce, so you bring in an international one. And that brings its own challenges, let alone you losing half of your occupancy. But yeah, how did they get that? If that's something that you were doing for a long time as well.
Sorry, John. Let me interrupt very quickly. So before you continue, because our viewers aren't just people who work in care, so certain words like RI, it requires improvement. So just explain a little bit. Double occupancy, what does that mean? So just a little bit of explanation, because people who are also interested in understanding the care sector also listen as well. So just to help the understanding.
Sure. So just on double occupancy, so shared occupancy, so bedrooms with 2 beds in them, where typically you might have a couple in that bed, a married couple, and we've managed to maintain a couple of those shared occupancy. Some people like to call them companionship rooms. So we've managed to maintain a couple of those with husband and wife couples within those rooms. And actually, in some points, actually, in that home where private pay clients whose money is running out, they said, okay, we don't mind if you've got a shared occupancy room, we don't mind our relative moving in with that person who they're quite friendly with, because it will make our money last longer. So we've had a couple of that, but fundamentally, a 31 bed care home with 8 rooms that were shared occupancy, reducing that kind of beddage, those number of beds down to about 8. We might get 9 or 10 out. Might get 9 or 10 out of those, which would have previously been 16 beds. We might be able to sell 9 or 10 of them, which took a significant amount off of our revenue when those beds were occupied. So that care home, we purchased it, and actually it was a care home when we purchased it that was struggling. It had some people who owned it that had lost interest. They were a farming family. It was either I can't remember, it was requires improvement or an inadequate at the time we purchased it, but it had been embargoed. It was having a lot of difficulty, and we actually refurbished the whole home, put a lot of money into it, and recovered that home to a good rating from being quite a poor place. But it had always had a history of filling these double occupancy rooms from local authority funding. Obviously, during COVID, and we understood that, they were less happy about people sharing rooms because of cross-infection, etc. Although most of the residents we had that were already in shared rooms stayed in shared rooms, they were very familiar with each other, and probably the cross-infection risk wasn't that great. We think about hospitals where the acute infections were. They ain't all in single occupancy rooms, are they? They're in 4 or 5 bed bays, whatever it might happen to be. So the idea that you need a single occupancy because of COVID is probably a little bit questionable. Anyway, post-COVID, no discussion, just a decision. We're not doing this anymore. So no discussion with us as providers, no risk impact assessment. Try to have a conversation. Why aren't you doing this? Or we're just not doing it anymore. We're not buying. So we tried many.
Did they move them out?
No, just didn't purchase anymore. So the people we had stayed, but any new inquiries, just no new placements.
Because if your numbers have gone down, sorry, what happened with your staff? Because surely you needed half the workforce. I'm thrilled to say this episode was sponsored by the amazing Astra. Now, everyone knows I love people that support the care sector, and this is exactly what Astrot do. If you're like me and you're not very good at IT, they take away all that stress. They manage all your cybersecurity, making sure your data is safe, and we all know, especially in the care sector, this is hugely important. They take all that burden away from us as providers and carers, and they support your staff as well to make sure they are doing things right. This episode has been brought to you because of them, and I'm truly grateful. So if you need help and support, you want it done to a CQC outstanding level, you want the ICO to be happy, then please get in touch with Astrot. It is astrot.co.uk, and you will not regret it.
So not quite half the workforce. So we're thinking it's a 31 bed home, and 8 of those beds were still available. 8 were half. So our capacity, 8 out of 31 beds. So we're down to kind of about a 25 bed home. Obviously, you need critical capacities in nursing homes. So you still got to have 24-hour nursing cover. So that's a significant cost. I think we still needed a minimum of 3 staff on nights. You couldn't operate even at 25 beds without 3 staff on nights. I think we were able to reduce the day shift by 1 member of staff by reducing. So we were able to cut a little bit of cost out, but not a significant amount.
So I'm still digesting every single thing you've said, John, but just on the point at the point where the local authorities stopped referring in, were you on a framework, or did you have a relationship with the local authority where they just referred in directly from the local authority, or were you on a framework?
So there's a contractual framework in place. So we're a contracted provider, local authority come in and do their quality inspections, but they have a spot purchasing system. So both Milton Keynes and Worcester both, they have a contractual framework in which they advertise a contractual price, but everything is placed through a brokerage type process where they put out an assessment to their community of providers. Community of providers say whether they can meet the needs and put in a bid to provide that service. And then it's either accepted or not. So if they accept your price and you say, yeah, we think we can provide that, here's the price. They'll either come back and say, you're too high, come down, offer us best value. The family have been to look at the home, they really like it, but we've got better value. Come in and can you do it at a lower price or what have you? And that's how the process typically works across Milton Keynes and Worcester. I don't know if that's happening elsewhere, but that's definitely the process across our 2 commissioners.
So one of the things that I absolutely loved is that you're speaking about your experience. And as Kat said earlier, when you joined, it's not really we're glad to have you on here, but the reason why you're here is not really one to really be excited about. So thank you for coming on here. So one of the things that really interested me was really understanding the reason why you decided to actually call it quits. Is it because, and from listening to your story, I was taking notes because I was trying to paint a picture so we can get a really good understanding to pinpoint exactly where the problem starts. Is it with the local authority? Is it because you're in a framework where it's a race to the bottom, where, like you just said, when you put out your costing, another provider puts out a cheaper costing, and then it's just a race to the bottom? And I wanted to ask you, when you decided to end your business, what was your rollout plan? Reason being, so a friend of mine works for a company, and I'm going to digress a little bit. And she came home to me saying, I've just been in a manager's meeting, and my company, where they're aggressively acquiring. So they're going from a group of 180 care homes to about over 300. So that's the expectation. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, one of the reasons I really wanted to ask you was, as part of your rollout plan, who is actually coming into the sector? Is it hedge funders who can actually afford to play the money game? Because if you have enough money, yes, you can bid, you can put in lower bids. If your care home is owned by hedge funds, private equity firms, then you have a lot of money. You can afford to say, actually, I can do this package for £19.50 an hour, as an example. So I just wanted to ask you to get a really good picture about why you're leaving, your rollout plan, who is coming into the sector, and what the actual problem is here. Why wasn't the local authority able to work with you to support you as someone who has been in the sector for so long, who is a sector veteran with lots of experience? you with your portfolio, you're the kind of person, well, with your portfolio anyway, we need you in the sector, basically. We need your expertise, we need your service, we need everything about you. But yes, you're leaving. Why? Is it because other people are funding? Is it because people like you actually just can't afford to scale? Yeah, I know Sophie and Kat, you guys own care homes as well. I don't know if this is something you face as well. Is it when you get to a certain threshold, is it acquisition next? And if you acquire, then you get a bit of money from hedge funders, so you can actually bid for lower bids. I have no idea, for lower prices rather. So that's I don't know if my question was clear, but I just really wanted to find
not in one, but maybe just try and hit any of them, John. Which one resonates?
Sorry, clearly I've just been. Yeah, please. I'm going to stop talking now, John. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, so some really interesting and quite challenging questions there that I'll need to see if my older grey matter can wrap itself around. So let's think about, so where did I decide to leave? I didn't decide to leave the sector. The bank called quits on us. So we had a phone call. So how this works in reality, you're in breach of covenant. You start talking to your bank because you're in breach on debt covenant. The bank then said to you, we need a plan for how you're going to get back. So our plan was to sell the care home and refinance our other care home and develop it. So we were operating with one care home with much lower leverage. Because, and this was probably a bit of the story I missed earlier, because we started losing occupancy and fee rates over in Milton Keynes, so the home we were trying to sell, we had decent offers, they started to fall away. Or when they got to kind of bank financing, the bank finance didn't quite work out, because we found ourselves a little bit like when you chase a stock market share when it's suddenly on a downwards trail and you're trying to sell out of the market, when the share constantly is losing money and you're trying to get out before it bottoms out. So that's kind of how it felt trying to sell our care home. And I know you've all campaigned on the national NI increase issue. So when that happened, I thought, well, there goes X points off of EBITDA. There goes our valuation, and we haven't sold yet. So that's going to see our business worth less and less as occupancy dipped, fee rates dipped, our EBITDA dipped, our valuations dipped, and we just saw our value of our business before we got a sale away disappearing ahead of us. So the bank, we lost three attempted sales. We lost. So at that point, the bank says to us, your terms are coming due. We're not going to renew your facility. So if you don't get refinanced by the X date, so we were still trying to sell, the bank accepted that we're still trying to sell, but it's got to get away by whenever it was, September 18 months ago or so. We didn't get a sale away by September, so £1.7 million put on overdraft. Right. The costs of that overdraft completely tripling in terms of servicing the finance and all the debt. So we still put a sales platform more really. At that point, I was kind of thinking we just need to get both homes away now. Trying to keep one home, sell the other. Strategy's not working. Our best chance of getting out here with our shirts on our backs to get both away. My business partner didn't agree. He wanted to hang on to the other. Equal shareholders, we were in direct deadlock. So we had to go with the strategy that was trying to keep one, sell the other, with some quite complicated financial shenanigans behind the scenes to make it work. Bank eventually lost confidence with that. They brought the insolvency practitioners in to supervise and oversee our spending on essential payments only. They've been with us now for goodness knows how long, charging us a good rate as well, all going on to our bottom line, all being charged to us, even though they're appointed by the bank. We're told we appoint them, we pay for them, etc. So these costs just escalate like you wouldn't know. So you're in that situation. You've got IP oversight, insolvency practitioner oversight on your business. They haven't taken control. You're still left as directors in control with all the liabilities. But every time you do something the bank don't disagree, you get an email or a call saying, we're not honouring any payments this week until you do this or that. So they freeze your accounts because they've got control. So we have from 1.7 million overdraft, we had no positive cash flow, right? So every bit of money we spent was under the bank's discretion. So the bank can just turn the taps off. So as soon as you say, we haven't done this in time, or we haven't done whatever it is, particular thing you've asked us to do this week in the time you'd like us to do, call at the end of the week. Okay, until that's done, we're not supporting you anymore. We're not supporting any more payments out of your account, so your suppliers don't get payments. So you're then at risk of your suppliers ordering a wind-up petition against you to get paid. So the risk just...
Do you feel like the local authority could have done anything different? Because it seems like a lot of the issues were deeply financial. And I'm trying to figure out if this is a lesson on how to finance your care home so to future-proof it, or do you feel like the local authority could have worked with you to ensure that you sustained to remain a viable business? What role do you think the local authority would have played?
Okay, so I'd kind of give you one comment. So we reached out to our local authorities many times about the issues, email, tried to phone. I don't know how with your local authorities what they're like, but generally you get a generic email. You accessing senior people in the commissioning team is nearly impossible. In each commissioning area, we're one small 20-bed, 30-bed care home. We're a small player. So when you try and reach them individually at the most senior level, trying to get a response, we find pretty impossible. And when you go to the local authorities forums or whatever they run in the local areas, that's a one-way communication street. They're particularly just telling you what their plans are. They're not having the opportunity, and it's not the forum to have the opportunity to talk about your individual business distress. And when we try to reach out, we've not been able to get through the impenetrable wall of the kind of the more junior people into the senior. So the first time I managed to get a senior contact was when I notified the commissioners, and it took ages to get a message through at that point because the only email I could use was the generic commissioning email to say, I need to notify you, we've been told we need to close our care homes by the bank. We're no longer viable. And that took several days and phoning up and asking if people received my email to eventually get the heads of commissioning to call me back. And without naming names, the Milton Keynes relatively new head of commissioning said, I'm really sorry, is there anything we can do to support you? I notice you've got some of the lowest fees in the area that we're paying you. We can do an immediate fee review and we can help you with voids. And I said, well, I think it's probably a bit late in the day, but let me put you in touch with our insolvency practitioner, because at this point they've got all control, all decision making. Let me put her in touch with the insolvency practitioner to see if you were to do that, improve our cash flow situation, whether that would allow us a delay on closure to see if we can improve the business, get a sale away or what have you. The bank said, oh no, that'll take 3 months to 2-3 months to turn into a real improvement in cash flow. We're not interested, we're not taking any more risk here. So we're proceeding with closure. And that's kind of how brutal it gets, I'm afraid. It gets really brutal.
Can I just say a huge thank you for sharing your story, because you must have gone to hell and back with that. That is just so intense, even to listen to, that I'm feeling the stress on your behalf almost, like just through the screen. So just thank you for sharing that. And I think it comes at a really important time, because it's a warning. It's a real warning to providers out there that they have to fight their corner, because at the end of the day, with you not operating, that's another, like so many beds that aren't available to people who need care. And local authorities do have a legal obligation to, they've got responsibility for market sustainability. So really, there should have been a lot more engagement with you than what you've had. And the matters are really tricky. I know what it's like with covenants. You can spend the majority of your week trying to look at figures and stressing about covenants when all you really want to do is worry about the care. But that is, I'm sure a lot of people will actually relate to that. So my question really is, from everything that you've been through, is there anything for people, providers who are just trying to keep things together, who are staying optimistic, but the reality is pretty scary, and now we're in a war that's rising all prices up? Is there anything that you would say to do for them to start doing now at this point, which, you know, you wish you would have known maybe a year, 18 months ago? Any sort of lessons learned, tips?
It's pretty tricky. So yeah, keep your, I think on the financial side, keep your leverage as low as possible, so that you're not exposed to being over, have too much debt in your business. That's, I think, fairly critical. It becomes pretty hard if you become overexposed to local authority residents. The only way of surviving in this market now, if you're just a standard, I know there are people who get better prices for more complex care, and so forth. But if you're a standard residential nursing home care provider, if you can't leverage private pay, and you're overly dependent on local authority pay at standard rates, and you've got any kind of leverage that you've kind of bought in. So, our valuations of what we purchased our care homes at, the valuations now are nowhere close to what we purchased our care homes at 15 years ago. So the leverage position is pretty critical. The ability to attract private pay residents, and my campaign, which we might talk about in a bit, is all about that risk or cost and risk transfer from government, fundamentally through commissioners, down onto providers and everybody else in the value chain. And I kind of think we've all lived with that. It's like the boiling frog syndrome. You turn up the heat slowly enough, we just get accustomed to it. We get used to the fact that we're put in the immoral position, in my view, absolutely immoral position of saying to one person, you pay £800 for care, you pay £1,600 because I need you to pay for that person's care as well. So people up and down the country are losing their life savings to pay not only for their own care, but somebody else's care. And we've accepted that as a sector. We've used that as our survival mechanism. And it's wrong. It's so deeply wrong. And I've been part of that game as well. That made me survive for the length of time I've survived. That's only exposed me. And I thought it was normal, because the sector thinks it's normal. But it can't last forever because there just aren't enough private payers in the system. And as we lose value beds in older buildings, beds that can be sold at a reasonably fair cost of care, as those leave the system because they're not sustainable, all we're going to be left with is high pay beds, private sector beds of high value. When did we get to a point where the only type of beds being developed in the sector are those with huge rooms, big en suites, fine dining, cinemas? People don't live like that at home. Why are they expected to live like that when they need care? We need fair value, modest accommodation that looks after people well. But we're moving to a sector that is predominantly determined by private equity funds chasing that high private pay money with people that are buying with their heart for their relatives the best care that they think they can get in lovely facilities. And I've seen my wife's family do exactly the same for their mother. When it came down to choosing between homes, they'd got some money. Best to go into this high value, fine dining, beautiful brand new care home at £1,900 per week. That's just not sustainable. Local authorities can never fund at £1,800, £1,900 a week. My prediction will be by 28, 29, with this 4 billion investment, etc., that will allow maybe about £100 a week uplift to local authority funding, is that private funders will be paying over £3,000 a week to subsidise local authority funding by 28, 29. £3,000 a week. That just becomes completely unsustainable. You look at where prices have gone now. It wasn't that long ago where a privately funded resident was maybe paying £1,000, £1,100 a week and managing on that maybe a little bit more. but we're now close to £2,000 a week in most private pay facilities, and sometimes more. This is crazy.
It was about £229, John, when I was back in the day with the care homes. And I just want to add in, because I know I'm a bit conscious of time. Firstly, if you ask the councils outright, is it a race to the bottom? Does that happen behind the scenes? They'll tell you, no, it's not written anywhere. It doesn't happen. If someone's telling you that, it's an absolute load of crap. We know it's happened. Sorry it's happened to you. That's absolutely awful. And, like Obi said earlier, we shouldn't be losing someone like you from the sector, someone with all of your passion, experience, expertise. That is a massive loss to the sector as a whole. But I'm also sorry for all of your staff that have lost their jobs or are going to be losing their jobs because you were let down by the council, and that council should be absolutely ashamed of themselves that they haven't come forward to, one, support you sooner, two, support your workforce, and allow those people to stay in their home where they have been happy with you. They should be damn ashamed of themselves that they put money before privacy, respect, dignity. And hopefully with the petition, which I want you to talk about, John, so that everyone knows about it, the councils learn from this, that actually their decisions they're making are on human lives. They're on people that have dedicated, refunded their houses, give up everything for other people with nothing but backlash, support, cut of funding. And I'm sorry, John, if you are having personal issues as well. I know you mentioned earlier that you've got some personal guarantees on your house, I'm guessing, cars probably. And I'm really, really hope that you don't end up losing everything by trying to do the right thing. Today's episode was proudly sponsored by Astrot. Now, Astrot does some absolutely incredible work around cybersecurity, secure emails, IT setups, all the stuff as a provider I don't even want to think about. It is so boring, and the fact that they enjoy doing this as a job, I will never understand. So what Astrot does is they make something that I do not want to pay for affordable. And then they also deliver it in a way that makes sure I'm meeting standards, exceeding standards, and not walking into a children's home full of children accessing things they shouldn't do. So they give me peace of mind. I'm able to sleep at night. I'm able to maintain my quality and my governance to ensure I protect my contracts, and most of all, I protect the people that I look after. So thanks, Astrot, for doing a job that not many people would want to do, and it is absolutely a well-needed public service. If you want to find out about this affordable, boring but necessary stuff, go to astrot.co.uk to enjoy your sleep.
So I kind of guess a couple of weeks back I was up in Scotland, taking a week away, doing some winter climbing and mountaineering, talking to some friends and colleagues up there as we were kind of battling our way through deep snow and whatnot. And I kind of was just thinking about it. I was thinking about this risk transfer thing. I was just thinking, this is crazy. This is crazy that nobody's really, and subsequently I've kind of, looked, and I know you guys are talking about this kind of stuff all the time and a lot. And I really appreciate that. And I'm probably a little bit late coming to the game, actually, in terms of stuff you guys have been talking about. But I just thought this is great. And I suppose it was a bit impulsive. I sat up kind of late one night. I'd been kind of writing a fair bit, posting stuff on LinkedIn. And I just thought, I think I'd seen somebody else's petition. And I just kind of thought, a petition. How about that then? I think it was something on student finance or something I'd seen a petition on. I thought, why not? Why not give a petition a go? That might be fun. So I kind of, your favorite topic recently of AI, I did a little bit of chat GPT on what it needed to raise a petition, etc., just to get some sense behind that. I thought I'll give it a go. So I put in crafted a petition application. Had to get you have to get 5 people to sign it before they'll even consider it. So friends and family were drafted in to say, quickly just sign and say that you support this petition, and the 5+ kind of signatures we've got. And now we're waiting to see if the petition service accept in terms of it meets all of their kind of weird and wonderful criteria about what's allowed to go through as a petition. If eventually it does go through, I think 10,000 signatures, it gets consideration of some sort. 100,000, it gets a full debate. I think, I kind of guess the concern there is that a lot of people have commented on LinkedIn and things that there is, people are fairly passive about this stuff, that they're not as engaged as they could be about the problems. So how do you get 100,000 people to sign a petition about a social care issue? Well, I think, we've all got providers, commissioners, care staff, care recipients, informal carers. We've all got common purpose here. We've all got common purpose to sort this failure out. It's not just a failure that's affecting me, it's affecting the fact, and I've heard you guys all talk about it, our care staff that are on nowhere near the same terms and conditions as the NHS for delivering publicly funded services. It's ridiculous. They've carried the burden through poor terms and conditions and low pay for government underfunding for ages. And you've talked about the commissioning issue. So we can shout at local authorities, but they haven't got the money. It doesn't matter how much we shout at them, they're never going to find the money. This needs, I think Kat and I both kind of highlighted the Labour Together National Care Fund proposal, or any other proposals out there that basically say this needs a national solution for funding in social care. And it absolutely does need a national solution. Shouting at individual commissioners won't work. We've all tried that. We've known, the idea of the Casey Commission and having to wait for that when it will come at the end of a political cycle, it's a nonsense again. We need common purpose among all the participants in this sector to address this funding issue, because all of the issues pertain from the lack of a fair price for care, for funding. And we've known it for years. We've known it since before the Dilnett Review. We've known it from after the Dilnett Review. I've got a list here of every report and committee report that's been written that has said there is inadequate funding. The situation between private pay and local authority pay needs to be addressed. It's a known issue, but it's been kicked into the long grass time and time again. And everybody says, well, unless we get enough noise politically, that it's not a vote winner, so we can't change the public. My position is this: imagine everybody in social care today decided not to work, decided to take action. We would have a humanitarian crisis in this country beyond the scale of anything we've ever had.
Is that going to happen? Is that you can speak on this? Is that going to happen? Because the people the carers, the people who actually choose to be carers, they need the work. Because Kat, I absolutely love your posts when you do the analysis of where would you rather work? Would you rather work for £14 an hour or sit at home and do? So the people who are actually coming into the sector, for want of a better word, they're desperate. They're like, okay, do you know what? This is as a last resort. And there are some people who come in with genuine hearts, but a lot of them are with the conditions that carers have to work under. A lot of people wouldn't play that role. So asking them to not go to work and maybe even lose not earning, it's a huge ask as well. That's another problem. That's a massive problem to address as well. And I just wanted to quickly just confirm something, because Kat, when you said the council wasn't supporting John, I thought he said, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought you said you got support from the council. It was more the actual finances, because that's another problem on its own. People coming into finance care homes, not having enough understanding about the care industry, that's a separate problem. I think that's a separate conversation. So I just wanted to clarify, was it a case of lack of support from the local authority, or your funders not really understanding and supporting? Which was it?
I think it's a bit of both over. The councils were pushing down the funding to the lowest bidder, and then removing the double occupancy without risk managing the impact that would have had on John and his company. So for me, this is how it started. And then it's had the ripple-on effect, which then comes into the finance side. But had they said to John 12 months prior, John, we're going to stop doing double occupancy. John could have maybe converted that building, added on those extra things, raised the money whilst counts are looking good and cash flows are healthier. And he could have made those changes proactively. But instead, we've got a very reactive decision to just stop something, cut off the lifeline, not considering the impact that will have on the staff, the residents, the cash flow, the provider, and then it's had the sort of ripple-on effect. So I think it's a bit of both, Obi, if I'm honest. And John, I'll let you come in if correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're absolutely right, Kat. It's a combination of both. I mean, it all starts predominantly from commissioning decisions that are not consulted upon effectively, those small decisions that don't bring every provider into a room or think about the impact, because we're a competitive market, right? So commissioners, and particularly lower down the commissioning cycle, they're just managing a competitive market of providers. They're all equal. Who can we get the best value from? So they don't want to work collaboratively with us because they're managing a market. And that's wrong because, at the end of the day, it's not that kind of market, and we're going to end up with significant market failure. In fact, we've got market failure across the board because when you've got two people paying significantly different prices for the same service, in my mind, that's market failure. And so we have market failure and we've lived with it for a long time. And that results in people leaving the sector, certain types of provision falling apart, and the consequences that I face. So I hope, Obi, that kind of between myself and Kat, we've been able to answer your question.
Yeah, I just wanted clarity on that because when it comes to another aspect of this whole structure or infrastructure is the financing aspect of it, especially when it comes to care homes. There's a massive area around financing and the role that plays and understanding. Because I had a conversation with Christie's & Co, which you most probably know, and they said one of the decision-making criteria is a care home's CQC rating. So when you mentioned your ratings changing, I was like, oh yeah, for a funder, for a financer, 100% red flag, even not understanding that, it could be possibly maybe due to a registered manager leaving. There's so many reasons. So I just wanted a bit of clarity just so the listeners understand exactly what went wrong, sharing your story. Yeah. But I think this is a good segue to talking about the Baroness KC review, because I really wanted to talk about that and how you got into it and your contributions, because I saw that you contributed to the review. So how was that?
Yeah, so I picked up some feeds on Baroness KC Nuffield talk. Obviously, that's pretty powerful, and it creates the review creates a platform for contribution. And I thought, well, hey, I'm going through all this stuff at the moment. I need to say something about this and contribute and put forward the things that not only about my situation, the collapse of my business, and all of that, but if you've read or read the paper that I wrote and submitted to the review, and subsequently have submitted to the Care England survey, you'll kind of see my broad platform of concerns that range from the way that commissioners operate in terms of not collaborating. There's an issue about funding, which they can't afford until we have some kind of national care fund, not collaborating and not planning with providers a fair market and a fair provision. CQC, in terms of how they operate, the whole combination of regulation and quality assurance, it's been proven now without doubt that is a broken system of management. I mean, it was something that was cobbled together over many years of different regulatory systems to bring together a system that is completely, and I don't, even what they're doing now is completely unfit for purpose. It's duplicative. It leaves people on ratings for years on end that have no bearing onto their current quality. I've got a care home that's been on good for 8 years with nobody near nearby, and one that's been on RI for nearly 4 years with nobody near nearby. Who knows what the quality of those care homes are actually like? But in fact, we do know because local authority have been in, inspected them every year, put a quality development plan in, identify some issues, you work with it during the year, address their concerns, they update their plan, and you actually have an up-to-date position on quality. So regulation and quality being combined in this one overarching regulator is an utter nonsense that doesn't work and never will work. And I'm sad to say it creates an industry for people that have done. See, I've just got something flagged up on there. That creates an industry for people who want to tell us how we're failing and how we can do better. That they don't actually operate or run care homes, but want to tell us all how we should, without actually understanding the full constraints of what we're managing. So people come in and say, "Oh, you need to train all your staff, or you should have higher staff numbers," and yet they don't understand the financial consequences of those things. It's just utterly mad.
Just going to say, John, what's happening in my area, and I don't know if, again, this is up, and Sophie, I don't know if it's happening in your area, or it's definitely happening within dom care, is what we're having now is clients that are privately funded, instead of going directly to the provider, they go to the council. The council will pay us the council rate, and the client pays the private rate to the council. We don't get that same rate, we get the framework rate. So then the council are getting the inflated admin fee, and then we have to stick to the framework cost. So actually it's completely diminishing the private market role in the dom care sector. So I don't know whether this has been happening in care homes or not, or whether it is something that is going to happen. But I think we also need to be mindful of that, because I think a lot of the excuse around that is, so we've got the data, so we know how many people are in care, because one day we might have to fund that care. But I just think it's very interesting that, we do have other people topping up other people, but is that something they are tackling now? And that is going to be, be changing. And actually the ones that are making a lot of money because they are looking after those private ones, are they prepared for those lovely flashy buildings and all the singing and dancing stuff to be able to offer the Travelodge style care homes when they realise that they're going to have to be relying on council funded rates? I just think that's something we need to absolutely consider. And just going back to your point what you said about the Casey Commission, I just don't know who thinks we've all fallen off a bloody Christmas tree or something, but we know this is coming out at the end of their term, and then it will just get kicked to the side again. It's just an excuse not to do anything, I feel personally, during this term. It's a get out of jail. It's being used just to shut us up as per usual. And I don't buy it. Other people shouldn't buy it. And there's just too much talk around the Casey Commission, and nothing will change. It's just a diversion. And we're all clever enough and smart enough to know that is exactly what it is. But the last thing I just wanted to bring in was the recent questionnaire done. So, John, I think me and you have been quite, we've been talking about over social media about paying into like an NI for your care as you get older. And people have done, the King's Fund's done a survey on, are the public happy to pay more taxes to fund social care? And we can all guess the results of that, right? There was about 28% that were happy to pay more taxes to fund social care, because people do not know the value of social care until they need that. You can't ask people to pay more for something that they don't know if they are ever going to use one day. They've never experienced it ever, or they see all the horror stories the news only ever talks about. So why are we going to pay more taxes into that? So I'm interested, John, and this will be my last question, I promise. So we've put out, and people have put out about sort of the NI. So you pay into, so the moment you start working, you pay into a pot. That funds your care pot through your life. And if you ever need to access that care pot, you've got your funding there. Your care's paid. You can choose what you want out of your own money, which is brilliant. And then when you run out, the government then has to pick up the remainder of your funding. Everyone then gets the same choice, the same budget, the same care funding. And then if you pass and you've never used your care pot, that pot of money gets transferred to your youngest sibling, next to kin, etc. Not in cash. It goes into their pot, and it stays within your family, and then they can use it as they get on later in life. What's your thought around that, John?
Okay, so I mean, I'm a bit more kind of, suppose, basic in terms of when we think about funding of any national service, particularly a service when we're in need, we're talking about fundamentally an insurance pool, a risk pool. So when I worked for American insurers, United Health, they said, oh, great, if we go into the NHS, it's great because you've got a national pool of risk. Everybody carries the cost of funding everybody's care, and you've got lifelong membership of that risk pool. So for me, it's a general taxation issue, whether it's through NI taxation or multiple things, or whether there is an element of a kind of contributed fund. But, I think there's a difference between need and want that politicians don't get. So people don't want to pay tax. Well, crikey, knock me down dead. Who wants to pay tax? Nobody wants to pay tax. But what do people need to pay? And what do they need to pay it for in a civilized modern society that looks after its most vulnerable? And I just come back to the point, there is a job, and I think, Kat, you talked quite eloquently on this, to educate the public about that need rather than that want. And we've always known you have to differentiate needs from wants. We know that as care providers. People might need something, but they might want something. We can't always meet wants, but we do need to meet needs. And we need a service. Either we've got to be honest and say we can't deliver a service because, you come back to that fundamental point. How can it be acceptable in any way whatsoever for a small group of people to bear a relatively small group of people to bear the costs of social care for those that need it, rather than that being equally distributed across the whole of our society? So that's a fundamental risk and cost issue that government is not addressing. It's not addressing that we have a big pool of cost that relates to people's social care needs in this country. That currently is predominantly being funded by private payers, low-paid workforce, providers like me who, I think by the end of it, when I've gone through my bankruptcy and everything else, will have contributed about £500,000 of personal money towards other people's care. That's what I'm saying, thinking, I've paid for that. I've paid for, I've provided a service and paid that kind of money into other people's care alongside other people who are funding this. So how in any way can that be acceptable? For me, it's as simple as we need to be able to create a proper, the same as we do for the NHS, a funding stream funded by the whole of our country, the whole of our society, that contributes to everybody's care when it's needed. Now, we need fair care tariffs for that. When the NHS introduced tariffs under payment by results back in, when was it? The 2010s or somewhere around there. Why did they introduce payment by results and tariff payment? Because they wanted to increase capacity, they wanted to introduce choice and a mixed market provision. So they introduced it so that private providers could enter the market as long as they could deliver services at the same price as the NHS for the same quality standards. That was the reason tariff was introduced. So every procedure, every episode of care had a price attached to it that everybody got the same, whether they were being provided by local authority, by an NHS service or a private provider under NHS brand. Now that's changed a little bit over the subsequent years, and I don't know all the details, so I've been at the NHS for a fair while. But there's still a fundamental principle of a tariff of choice. Now, we've always had a mixed provider market, well, ever since the 1980s Community Care Act, which took care away from local authorities. We've always had for a long time, we've had a mixed provider market of third sector, private, some local authority provision, all competing for, all delivering services, trying to deliver them to the same CQC standards, local authority quality standards, etc., but being paid, amazingly different prices, either by private payers or by local authorities. So an individual tariff that says this is the fair price of care, and we know what the fair price of care is. People have worked it out, and you just update those for inflation and everything. Since the Joseph Rowntree Trust first developed the report that Langbusen went on and renewed every year and charges a fortune to look at, we know what that fair price of care is. And it can be worked out, both in dom care, home care, both in, we haven't got as many complexities as the NHS in terms of pricing care, even if we argue we have. We haven't. We're much, much simpler, much less procedures.
I just feel like there are so many reflections. I'm learning so much. And I feel like this could literally be it needs to be like a whole session of like half a day where we all have to put all our heads together. We could come up with a plan. And then we just need to get one of us in as Prime Minister or Health Minister to see it through. That's what we need. We need an actual health minister, health and social care minister who's actually worked in social care. That's what we need. And maybe that's that. Maybe that's on your next thing to do after the petition. Get into Parliament. I'd vote for you.
Yeah, well, that's the risk, isn't it? The risk is when you get into power, you find the constraints there are much bigger than you ever anticipated, and you're just as constrained as everybody else that ever got there. So when you're commenting and pushing from the outside, it's a lot easier than actually having to deliver from a position of kind of responsibility and authority, and with all the constraints that you face. So we're kind of aware of that, and people have written eloquently about it. But that doesn't mean we should stop pushing and campaigning, even if we only get 60-70% of our ask. It's something, and to sit quietly and allow this to continue for another decade, while we see private care inflate to 3,000 plus a week, affordable care become less and less available across the country. So get to a point where people willing to take local authority price care is just not available because people can't do it. There are not enough private payers in the system to actually subsidise those local authority payments.
Absolutely. And I think that actually what you were doing in terms of using your experience to highlight to others is going to be a huge warning to everybody, wake up call, which I really appreciate. I said before, but also I think it's you could just put your head in the sand and say, right, I just want to forget about this, but you're getting out there, you're campaigning, and being on here is a huge part of that as well. So I just think, well, we all appreciate it. I appreciate your time. I'm conscious of time, but I don't know whether Obi or Kat wanted to ask any very final things, and we can let you go. And if not, then if there's anything else you wanted to press for apart from the petition, and then we'll let you have the rest of your afternoon. So Obi and Kat, you okay?
Yeah, nothing from me. Thank you so much, Jan. It was a pleasure. I was looking forward to meeting. I actually wanted to hear your story firsthand. And as Sophie said, so many lessons. I was making notes as you were speaking, and I really wanted to find out exactly where it went wrong. Because as Baroness Casey said, and I know, Kat, you're going to say, oh, we're all talking about it, but as she said, there are many people who sign up to get their CQC license. Equally, as many people are leaving the sector. So for people who are coming in, until tomorrow, there's going to be a younger John, as an example, who is currently studying or maybe practicing medicine, psychiatry, whatever the case may be, and who are looking into coming into the sector. So what, for me, I wanted to find out is, for someone like that, who has value to bring, what lessons can they learn from your journey? And you were able to answer that for me correctly. Well, not correctly. Well, thank you. That's it from me.
And just know, thanks, John, so much for coming on. We know how difficult it is. And I just think there's going to be so many people that will really take a lot from everything you say. They'll be nodding like I have on my neck's hurting, because I think I've nodded the whole way through. People are going to actually think I've now got a new medical condition, because I just agree with everything you've said throughout the whole one. And this is the quietest I've ever been, John. So you literally had me. You'll have the room. Your story is unfortunately not unique, but it's real. And there's so many people will enjoy listening to your thoughts on how things can improve, what we should be doing. And so many people will be able to resonate with the pain and suffering, quite frankly, that you're going through. And you're always in my thoughts, John. I know you've spoken to a couple of my other board members of the NCA as well, and those conversations are going to continue. I back your petition. I support everything you're doing, and just don't give up the fight, John. Never give up.
That's really kind of you, Kat. And I just want to actually give a shout out to the NCA board. I was never a member of the NCA, sadly. Don't know quite why. I was part of Care England. Haven't heard much from them, but I think I've spoken to almost every member. I think almost every member of the NCA board has reached out to me personally and talked to me and offered me support. And a little bit emotional when I think about it, because that I can't tell you how important that has been to me. I can't put it into words actually, but just to know that there are people out there thinking, concerned, from a small care provider, who's got 2 little care homes, going through a bit of a kind of this kind of crisis that probably in the main wouldn't register unless somebody kind of like me, who's not willing to shut up and be quiet about it, but wants to talk about it. Part of my personal therapy, part of my kind of trying to understand, am I just an absolute rubbish, was I a rubbish care home operator, or am I a canary in the mine? And I like to think I'm probably a canary in the mine, that I'm the first one to get a sniff of that toxic gas because I was over-leveraged, had too small a building, was subject to double occupancy, all the kind of things, some of the smaller, more economic provision that going forward we're going to need. We're going to need that provision that can be done at small scale. I mean, I saw, just as a final note, I saw a post by one of your board members on LinkedIn the other day, Jeffrey, is it? Who shared a post from America of a homeless project where people have got these little rooms in a massive warehouse. And it made me reflect, when I was a psychiatric nurse working in the old asylums or institutions, whatever you want to call them, how some of the commentary that led to the closure of those called them warehouses for people. I thought it was very fascinating that we've actually, in America, they're starting to actually build warehouses for broken people or distressed people. And that kind of felt a bit kind of dystopian to me, seeing that post. I think it was being celebrated as an innovation. But it felt incredibly dystopian. That we've actually now gone to the fact where we're developing these huge warehouses for people. And that's how the old asylums used to be referred to when we used to do long stay care for people with dementia and so forth in 30-bed dormitory wards where they'd get care before they went out to the social care sector. But hey-ho, lessons of history and whatnot. Yeah.
And we shouldn't forget the history. That's very interesting. That's a really good reflection to end on. So if you've got anything that's been bothering you this week, this month, this year, we want to hear about it. We will be platforming your questions as best as we can. So make sure you email us. The link in the email is below.